Are you looking for an orchestration tool, or maybe want to switch up the tool that you're using in your current organization? Well, in this video, I'm going to outline my 5 favorite orchestration tools. Before we jump in, I want to add a small disclaimer to say that I'm by far an expert on every single piece of orchestration software that's out there. I've tried to seed the information based on the information in this video based on my experiences with the software, as well as the experiences of community members through their blog posts and through Slack channels and Slack discussions. So if your orchestration tool that you like isn't listed in this video, feel free to comment or leave it in the comments below. I'm sure we'll make a part 2 of this orchestration tool video at some point in the future, and I'd love to add your tool to that next video. Without further ado, let's dive in. The first tool that I want to discuss is Shipyard. Now I know what you're thinking, like, isn't this the Shipyard YouTube channel? It is. So we are a little bit biased, but we think our tool is pretty cool. And I want to outline for each one of these tools, I'm going to outline the pros and cons of why you should use it along with pricing. So jumping into why I like Shipyard. So first off, we have over 100 low-code templates for most of the big players in the space. So what that means is that you can jump in and use our Python templates and not have to use any of your own code at all, and just type your information into the input bars and just get something up and running quickly. With that being said, that means that there's a quick setup time. So that means that you can get your workflows up and running very quickly because Shipyard is self-hosted. So that means that Shipyard handles all the infrastructure costs for you and all that setup. So you don't have to worry about any of the infrastructure. You can just worry about building your workflows using our pre-built templates. With that being in mind, a low-code or no-code tools are not always the best. So Shipyard also gives you the ability to mix in your own code scripts as well. So you can mix in our low-code templates. You can put your code in between those tasks before or after. So you can kind of just mix and match using your own scripts versus our scripts. And then you can also build workflows using YAML or using the user interface using drag and drop. So this gives you a great opportunity to kind of programmatically create your workflows, or you can drag and drop using the UI. And we also have an API that you can edit those workflows. You can create workflows and things like that as well using our API. So some reasons why maybe you shouldn't use Shipyard, or kind of what Shipyard is lacking. So kind of on the opposite side of the pro that I mentioned earlier, there's no self-hosting option. So that means if you want to you can't run Shipyard locally on your own database or inside of your own server. So that can be a security concern for some teams. We do try to rectify that in ways, but some teams self-hosting is exactly what you want. And unfortunately at Shipyard, we can't offer a self-hosting option as of right now. Second, we're also a newer tool to the space. We've been around for less than 5 years. So there is, less out there about Shipyard written by the community. That isn't always a bad thing, but if you want something that's been, tested and battle tested through for 20 years, Shipyard doesn't have that just yet, but hopefully in 20 years, we'll be able to make a new version of this video, and we'll be able to take that off the category there. And then lastly, there's no backfill option. So if your process fails, currently at Shipyard, you have to rerun the full workflow. So that can add a little bit of time to your testing, can add a little bit of time to if you're fixing a process that's broken. Something that we're definitely looking at trying to fix in the future, but as of right now, there is no backfill option to allow you to, if your workflow has 6 tasks in it, you have to rerun all 6 tasks whenever you rerun it. You can't just start at task 3 and continue through. Again, something we're working on, but definitely not there right now. For pricing for Shipyard, so we do have a free tier that is for 1 user, and it gives you 10 hours of runtime per month. So if you're a single developer and you're going to spend less than 10 hours a month of runtime, you can continue to use our free plan for as long as you want. But whenever you want to grow past that, whether you want to grow in the users in your organization or runtime, we do have paid plans as well. So our team plan includes 1 user and 10 hours of runtime. And that's $50 a month. That also includes some extra features from the free tier that I won't get into here in this video. That gets to the weeds. You can check out our website to look at that. But for each added user, it's $50 extra per month. And then for each hour after the 10 hours every month, it's $4 extra per hour. So that's everything to know about Shipyard. Let's jump in and look at our second tool. The second tool I want to mention is Airflow. Now, I feel like we couldn't have an orchestration video without talking about Airflow. I feel like those terms have almost been synonyms for each other, throughout the last 10 or 15 years. in the data space. So for Airflow, starting off with what we like about Airflow, the pros of Airflow. So Airflow offers a wide range of operators to connect with many technologies, and it's easily extendable to other technologies, but since Airflow is written in code, right? So anything that you can access with Python code, you can access with Airflow. So some of those things are pre-built out for you by the community or by Airflow, but anything that you can write in Python, you can use inside of Airflow. So with that in mind, there are a lot of resources out in the world. So Airflow's been around for a very long time, and it's been kind of a leader in the orchestration space for a long time. So there's a lot of resources out there in the wild. So on Stack Overflow, in Slack communities, blog posts, if you look for Airflow content, it's definitely out there. So you should have an easier time being able to set up what you want to do. So inside of Airflow, workflows are Python code. So that can be a disadvantage of Airflow. But in this case, I want to talk about why it could be an advantage for your organization. So since workflows are Python code, workflows can be stored in version control for easy rollback. So you can store your code in GitHub, so your team can have version control that way. So it's easy to roll back if something went wrong. And multiple people can also work on the workflow simultaneously. So as long as you have good version control at your organization, a good process is set up at your organization, then multiple people can work on these at the same time and push, and commit those things. And then tests can be written in Python to validate the functionality of your workflow. So since it is Python, you can kind of run it and make sure that things are running as you expect before you put it inside of production. Airflow also offers, scheduling and execution that allow for defining pipelines that can run at regular intervals. That's pretty much a given. It's pretty much a given with orchestration tools. If you can't run things at regular intervals, then what's the point of it being an orchestration tool? And then Airflow's user interface has gotten a lot better over time, but it allows you, it gives you in-depth views of the pipelines and the individual task that you have inside of Airflow. And it gives you a view of pipelines over time as well. And so you can look at the logs, you can manage the task, and then you can retry task if something goes wrong as well. So that's kind of Airflow. It has everything that you kind of would expect it just because it's been around for so long. So some reasons why you might not want to use Airflow or some kind of the disadvantages of Airflow. So Airflow is not built for kind of an infinitely running event-based workflows, and it's not a streaming solution. So streaming data is not going to be kind of a pro of most of these tools. There's one that will be able to take advantage of that, but streaming data is not going to be something that all of these tools can take advantage of. And then and also for Airflow, I think the biggest advantage is that you have to have your own infrastructure set up. So this is really hard to kind of like test out and just try out because you have to set up infrastructure on your side to run Airflow. Now there are some third-party companies that have came in and tried to fix that, like Astronomer. But of course, there's going to be a cost of Astronomer setting up that infrastructure for you. Another con is you have to be able to code to use Airflow. So if there's not anyone in your organization that can write Python code, you're going to have a hard time using Airflow because, like I mentioned before, the workflows are Python code. So it's kind of a prerequisite to using Airflow. You have to know how to code. And then, lastly here, it is complex to set up. So not just infrastructure complexities, but, there is a learning curve to figure out how to build these workflows inside of Airflow that some of like the low code or no code tools can kind of get around. So pricing for Airflow. So Airflow is technically free but with the big exception that you have to host it somewhere, right? So I mean, you could, I guess, run it on your local machine, but that would not be very scalable. So you're going to have some infrastructure to run Airflow. So again, that can be handled with with a tool like Astronomer that will do that infrastructure for you. Or you can run your own infrastructure on your end, but that's going to have some costs as well. So the tool is free, but there are some infrastructure costs that you're going to have on your side as well. So let's look at our third tool. The third orchestration tool I want to discuss is Prefect. So Prefect was kind of built off of trying to fix the issues that Airflow had. So kind of the pros of using Prefect are that there is a large community now. So Prefect was kind of a newcomer to the space, 5 or 6 years ago. But now they've built a large community around people that are to use Prefect, and now it's become one of the leaders in the orchestration space. So that means that you can easily find documentation. You can easily find support with people on Stack Overflow or in Slack communities or blog posts and things like that. So it's very easy to find help for if you want to set up a Prefect instance. So Prefect also supports tasks for data validation, caching, and resumable retries. So I mentioned that earlier with Shipyard. So resumable retries is something that can save you a lot of time. So if you're kind of in, if you have like an 8 or 9 task workflow and it fails on task like 6 or 7, you can retry it starting at task 5 and then continue on from there. So that should save you time on testing and as you're running in production if an error pops up. So Prefect supports event-driven workflows as well. So Prefect also has easy parallelization and scaling, which allows you to process large-scale data pipelines much more quickly than if they didn't, right? So that's really important with orchestration tools. It's a lot of times in orchestration, it starts off small, and that pipeline just continues to build and build and build. So being able to can't talk today, but as you can scale up that, it helps out that Prefect allows you to scale that a lot easier to make the processing those large data workflows a lot easier. And then Prefect also has a Python API to create, test, and debug workflows as well. So kind of the disadvantages of using Prefect is kind of the free tier is a bit limited at Prefect and may not be, it's not going to be suitable for users with larger workloads or more complex use cases. I mean, that's almost a given with these tools, right? That's just how it goes. We have to make money at some point. So that's something to think about though, as you're trying this thing, as you're trying it out and as you build up at some point, as your workflows get more complex, you'll have to switch over to the paid plan. And then Prefect's also, just like Airflow, very difficult to use for non-technical users. So Prefect is again another workflow as code. So if you're not a very strong and proficient Python programmer, Prefect's probably not the tool for you, because it's going to be very tough to get things up and running because you're going to have to learn Python as well as learning kind of the Prefect logic of making these workflows happen. So it's kind of like the Python, and you have to put it inside of these Prefect containers to make it work. And then another con or pro, depending on where your organization is you have to set up infrastructure for the non-cloud version of Prefect. So Prefect offers 2 products. So there's kind of the basic, the base Prefect that it started with. And then they also have Cloud Prefect Cloud now that they have the infrastructure set up for you. So with that in mind, pricing here, so the self-hosted version of Prefect is free. So just like Airflow, if you have your own hosting environment, you can use Prefect for free. However, their cloud service, Prefect Cloud, does cost money. And the cloud service starts off at $450 per month. And then for each user after the first user, it's $79 on top of that. And you can see more of a pricing breakdown on their page and kind of what you get in the free version of Prefect Cloud versus the paid versions. But that's the paid version of the cloud, where it's going to start off at $450 and then do $79 per month with each additional user. So that's Prefect. Let's jump into our next tool. Our 4th tool on our orchestration tool belt is Dagster. So Dagster is a newer tool to the space. And Dagster was developed kind of thinking about what Airflow and Prefect were struggling with from a developer view. And Dagster kind of built their product around those disadvantages that they saw with Airflow and Prefect. So you're going to hear in the pros and cons list kind of some of those things you heard before in the last 2 products that are advantages for Dagster. So let's jump in and look at those. So the pros for Dagster is that they can handle both batch and streaming workflows. So it's something I mentioned with Airflow and Prefect that they can't do streaming workflows, but Dagster can. So if your organization's looking for an orchestration tool that can handle streaming workflows, Dagster might be the one for you. And then Dagster takes an asset-based approach to orchestration, which allows you to focus on data dependencies. So that provides more visibility into how data flows throughout your pipeline. So with data dependencies, step B will be dependent on step A. And because of that, it allows you to have more visibility and a little bit more alerting and monitoring as well throughout your pipeline. So it's not just, flowing through a blank pipeline. There is steps that need to be done to get to that next step. Dagster also has a built-in metadata store to track and analyze pipelines, which, that's kind of, becoming a commonplace for these orchestration tools is being able to track and analyze your pipelines. But But they built that into their product, and they have comprehensive monitoring and alerting capabilities. Which again, if with their asset based approach to orchestration, you got to have that monitoring, alerting to let you know that like, hey, what happened in step A wasn't good enough to get to step B. So let us know so we can jump in there and fix it before too big of a delay inside of the production environment. On top of that, they do provide tooling for testing and debugging as well, so you can try to get in front of those errors, so you can test in the debugging, so you can hopefully those errors that would have happened in the production run can get caught before they ever get there. And so some of the disadvantages of using Dagster. So I've read multiple places that the learning curve for Dagster is pretty steep. And then some people consider it to be harder to pick up than Airflow, which, it's something that we always hear about Airflow, is that people and organizations struggle to kind of pick up what they need in the coding space for it, pick up, for the infrastructure, things like that. But yeah, some people think that Dagster is a bit harder to pick up than Airflow. So Dagster can't handle event-based workflows. And again, this could be changed now. I'm sure that was something in their update list that they were working on. So that could be a little bit off now, but according to what I've read, it can't handle event-based workflows. And Dagster is built kind of the same way as Prefect and Airflow, where that it must be self-hosted. But back in 2021, they released a new cloud product so that you can host. They can do all the infrastructure work for you on their side if you'd like to use Dagster in the cloud. But again, that's pretty new from 2021, so 2 years old or so now. So it's not as tried and true and tested as some of the other tools in the space. And again, another con for Dagster is that you have to work in code. Again, that's could be a disadvantage, could be an advantage depending on the technical proficiency of your team. But that's just something to think about whenever you're picking tools. So looking at pricing for Dagster, so of course, if you use the self-hosted model, you don't have to pay for anything, just like for Airflow and Prefect. However, the cloud-based model, so they have two models for that. So they have the fully cloud-hosted, and then they have the hybrid model. So the fully cloud-hosted model, which means they handle everything on their side from infrastructure, scaling up and down, things like that. So their pricing page says that is 4 cents per compute minute. So that's a little bit more ambiguous than some of the other pricing models that we've seen, which is more user-based. But so that's 4 cents per compute minute. And then if you use their hybrid model, which is where you handle the infrastructure on your side, but still run some things through them, that ends up being 3 cents per minute. So again, that's a little bit more ambiguous than some of the other pricing models, but I'm sure Dagster, if you're interested in using Dagster, they'd be happy to walk through that pricing model with you. So that's Dagster. So let's jump into our fifth and final orchestration tool. Our fifth and final orchestration tool that we're going to talk about today is Mage. So Mage is the newest player in the space that we've talked about. They're around a year old from what I can gather. But it's a pretty cool software, pretty cool, and they definitely have really cool branding. If I had better technology skills, I would have their little mage characters sending magic across the screen. But I'll work on that for the next video. So jumping into Mage and why I think it's a great tool and kind of why it's differentiated from the other tools we've talked about. So the first and I think the biggest point is that Mage uses a notebook user interface for building data pipelines. So I include that in a pro category. A lot of other people would consider that to be a disadvantage. It just depends on how you feel about notebooks. I personally love the notebook interface. But yeah, so the Mage you build out in the notebooks, which I think is really cool, and I think it's a big differentiating factor between all the other tools that's not exactly the case. So Mage also gives you the ability to code in Python and SQL, which again is another cool feature that they've added into the product that not a lot of orchestration tools have, is that you can actually use SQL inside of your pipelines as well. So they also have native integrations with the major cloud providers. So that's something like kind of think about with newer tools in the orchestration spaces. They won't have as much stuff built out as the other bigger players, right? So Airflow is going to have integrations with pretty much every product. Like the community is going to take care of that and kind of build that stuff out. But a newer orchestration tool like Mage, or even us at Shipyard, it takes us time to build out those integrations. But Mage has done a great job of at least getting the major players in the space that they already have those integrations built out on their side. Also, in Mage, data validation is written into each block and tested every time the block is run, which is great just to make sure that things are running as you expect them to. And then what's also cool is that each pipeline and data product can be versioned. So you kind of get a lot of version controlling in there so that, you're able to experiment, you're able to test, and not have to worry about things because it's going to get version controlled out. Also for Mage, a good point is that it's open source, so you can see all the code on GitHub. So if that's something that interests you, you can get on GitHub and go look through that and take a look at Mage. And then there's also visualizations built into the software as well, which I think is really cool. So looking through their demo, you can see them going through building out a visualization and documentation. I think that's a neat feature. Of course, like the visualization feature is not good enough to like get rid of your dashboarding tool, right? Like it's not good enough to get rid of Tableau, but it is something cool enough that you can just take a look at something and roll with it, which I think is neat. So some disadvantages of Mage is that it must be self-hosted. So they don't have a cloud-hosted model like all the other tools that we've mentioned so far. So Airflow has Astronomer, Prefect has Prefect Cloud, Dagster has Dagster Cloud, and then Shipyard is just fully hosted in the cloud. Excuse me, but Mage doesn't have that option as of right now, of my knowledge. I'm sure that's something they're thinking about building down the road, but that's not available currently. Also with Mage, you got to work in code just like the last 4 tools, or like the other 3 tools that I've talked about, with the exception of Shipyard. You have to work in code, so you have to know some Python and SQL to build out these pipelines. And again, Mage is the newest tool in kind of in this set and kind of in the ecosystem of the orchestration tools. It's really the newest tool out there. Which again, like that allows them to put in some cool features like the notebook user interface. But again, that means it's not as battle tested as like an Airflow or a Prefect. So that's just something to think about whenever your team's jumping in and trying to use Mage. As you can see, there are a ton of orchestration tools that are out there that can all work for your organization. Like I said in the introduction, if there's a tool that you use that we haven't mentioned in our video, feel free to drop it in the comments below so that we can look at it and potentially include it in a future video just like this. Ultimately, the best tool for your organization is going to be varied based on your specific needs and requirements. Just for example, like the infrastructure idea. So, if your team doesn't have infrastructure built in, doesn't have a dedicated DevOps team, it might be worth looking for a tool that doesn't require infrastructure versus one that does. We've covered some of the most popular tools in the market, including Airflow, Prefect, Dagster, Mage, and Shipyard. Each one of these 5 tools has their strengths and weaknesses, and we encourage you to do your own research to determine which one will be the best fit for your team. Links for each product discussed will be in the description below. And again, I did my best to do the best research that I could for this video, but if it's very possible that there could be some information that has been updated that makes something that I've said not true anymore. So again, do your own research on that and just make sure that the tool that your organization wants to use is good for your organization. And lastly, I, along with the team at Shipyard, would love to talk with you about orchestrating your data task and get rid of some of that grunt work that your team does on a daily basis, like manually running pipelines, manually pushing updates to dashboards, things like that take away your time, take away the time that you would like to do, bigger data tasks and things that you actually like doing. Feel free to grab a time slot in the description below, and we'd love to help you figure out whether Shipyard might be the best orchestration tool for you, but we'd love to just talk with you about your orchestration and what your team needs. And maybe if Shipyard isn't a good fit for you, we'd love to recommend the tool, maybe one of the 4 that we've discussed in this video, or maybe a different one, but we'd love to just help you get started in an orchestration journey, whether that's with Shipyard or whether that's with another tool.